Well, I think we're ready.
Okay, want to count us in?
No, hold on. Give me one moment.
Okay.
Yes, I can show you. One moment, I'm waiting for a yes. So we are now live. You can start in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sherry Luce, and I'm the Program Director for Red, Wine, and Blue, Pennsylvania. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to fair elections. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something really important. Running for office, especially the United States House of Representatives, is a very brave decision. It means putting your name, your values, your record, and often your family into the public eye. It means stepping forward at a time right now when public service can feel thankless and politicians or politics feels really personal. Regardless of party, ideology, or outcome, each of you here today have made a choice to engage, to lead, participate in the democratic process. You deserve our respect, so thank you. Today is about learning, listening, and giving the voters a chance to hear directly from you, the people who want to represent them. We ask the audience and our candidates also to approach this conversation with curiosity, civility, and a shared commitment to the future of our community. So if everyone agrees, let's go ahead and get started. Who's going to go first? We'll start with Lucia. Okay, the first question, tell us about yourself and what motivated you to run for Congress.
Thank you. Thank you so much for moderating, and thanks to fellow candidates for being here. I want to start a little bit about what I think about and how I think. What I think about these days is the bitter cold that has been here, unrelenting cold for the past few weeks. The fact that shelters for the unhoused in our community of Upper Bucks have had guests night after night looking for a warm place to sleep. Apartments in Montgomery County have been without heat for 2 months. Families are going to bed cold. Then I hear about our incumbent, Representative Fitzpatrick, hoarding $7 million in the bank for this election. And I'm disheartened because I hear responses that are, we need to raise $8 million to beat him. And I think the answer should actually be shame. Shame on him for using $7 million for an election. Shame on him for using $7 million to run attack ads on TV. We have to think differently, and it starts with introspection. We can talk about campaign finance, but it starts with us. We can run campaigns differently. We can do more with less. We can be resourceful, focus on impact. How we run a campaign is a model for how we will lead. I am proud to sit amongst grassroots campaigners. People tell us every day this is not realistic, but the more people who do it and try it make it real. I'm running for this office because to really change our broken system, we have to think differently because what we have is not working. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tom Taft, and I've been thinking about running for public office my entire life, my entire adult life. And my particular motivation was triggered in 2016 at a debate between Brian Fitzpatrick and Steve Sanders Sierra. And Brian stood up and criticized Steve for having overseen a tax increase in Harrisburg, even though Steve had pointed out that taxes were directly connected with improving infrastructure in this country. And Brian stood up and said, we're going to slash taxes, and that's going to create so much economic growth that everyone will be better off, the government will take in more money. At that point, I was sitting in the audience. I didn't get up and scream at him, but I was tempted to, because back in 2016, that was a bad economic theory. Today, it's a flat-out lie. And if you look at the entire Republican Party, the only cohesive thing that holds them together, besides hate and division and fear, is this notion that cutting taxes creates job growth. It doesn't, and until we get people to understand and until we provide alternative solutions to that, we're not going to make progress. I don't think Joe Biden was as effective a communicator as he could have been, but the fact is, the Republicans' bill in 2017 was called the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The Democratic equivalent was the Infrastructure Investment in Jobs Act. The fact is that in this country, we can create jobs, but we've got to get it into hands of people that are actually working. We're rebuilding infrastructure, and until we do that, we can't really make progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
So hi, I'm Rob Strickler. I want to thank Maker Street Studios for hosting this event and for putting this together. And I'm really happy to be back down here in Levittown and Fairless Hills area where I grew up. Before I came here, I actually went to a local Wawa and got myself a little breakfast sandwich and a drink. And oftentimes when I come down here, I visit my family and I go straight to their house and we have something, then I go straight home back up to Buckingham, which is where my wife and I live. But since I've been driving around this neighborhood and we would walk turf and canvas, it really feels like home to me, and I'm just so happy that we're having this event today here in Levittown. Why am I running for office? I would just assume somebody else be running for office, somebody who has the same values and ethics and moral clarity that I believe I do. But at the time I launched our campaign, was in July, there was only one person running as a Democrat, and that was the one who was sort of pre-selected by the party to be their establishment candidate. And I listened to this guy, and I was hoping to be inspired, but I was not. So I moved forward with running for office because I just do not believe he will be able to beat Fitz, and I know that I can, because I'm someone who can just pretty much tear the bark right off of Fitz, because he's pretty much lying to us by saying he's a moderate and I'm a bipartisan and talking about such things. But he's a member of the GOP. He's a member of Donald Trump's party. And let's be clear, the Republican Party stands for nothing but Donald Trump nowadays. That means Brian Fitzpatrick stands for Donald Trump. And he and his family have controlled this seat for 14 years. We're 0 for 7 against them. We need to think about a different strategy to win this seat. And I know I'm coming to this, if I win the primary, I have a strategy to beat Fitz. I frankly think it's going to be easier to beat Fitz than it is to win this primary, personally, because we got a lot of candidates, and one is a kind of an establishment guy. But I'm in this race not only to oppose Trump, but also to course correct for this country, so our federal government works for low to middle income people in not just lower bucks, but in this district and our entire country. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mike Zeltakalns, and probably most folks haven't heard of me. I am new to the political scene. And I want to start by thanking Rob Strickler and Mr. Taft and Lucia for arranging this today, and all the volunteers who made this possible. I would not have this platform to speak to you today if it weren't for these folks, because I only joined the race last week. And I only joined the race last week because I was motivated to action by the events in Minnesota. I, of course, have been watching what's been going on with our government for a long time, but have not been in a position to seek office, and in fact have never really thought about myself for office. But what Rob said just a moment ago really resonated with me. I'm here today because I see what's happening in our country. It scares me. I think the people who are running our country right now are just filthy, and I don't need to go through the reasons why. But I think that one of the people on the stage in front of you today has it to beat Bob, because I agree with you. I don't think Bob has I like Bob, and I will vote for Bob if he's the candidate, but I think that Bob is just lacking in the ability to meet the need to beat Fitz. And that's my mission, to beat Fitz. Fitz is the one who cast that deciding vote to make the One Big Beautiful Bill Act real. And that's the act that cut health care for 500,000 Pennsylvanians. That's the act that brought us closer to authoritarianism and fascism. And Fitz cut that act. As others have pointed out, he was the deciding vote. He's a Republican when it suits him, and he's an independent when it suits him, and neither of those things benefit the people of Bucks County. That's why in the 1st District, and that's why I'm running.
Okay, thank you very much. And before we move forward, I do want to be clear. All candidates for this seat were invited to participate today. and only those on camera right now are the ones who accepted this opportunity. And we do have another candidate joining us right now. And we'll let you get seated. The question is, introduce yourself, and then tell us what motivated you to run for Congress.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm running late today, guys. My name's Tracy Hunt, and I'm a 30-year resident of Bucks County. I currently live in New Hope. I've lived in Doylestown as well. I'm originally from North Carolina, born and raised at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My father's a 30-year U.S. active Army 82nd Airborne Command Sergeant Major. My mother was a hairdresser from Western Pennsylvania. They both high school graduates. I attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I then found myself up here going to law school, where I met my wife, who's from Washington Crossing, born and raised. We have two daughters, ages 26 and 24. And I've been a practicing attorney for 27 years here in Bucks, and I'm also a tenured full professor at Delaware Valley University, where I teach business law and sports law and human resource management. I was kind of just doing those two careers for 20 plus years, and like a lot of folks, I became incredibly frustrated and disheartened by the next level of politics beyond what we've always kind of grown up seeing, Republicans and Democrats fighting with one another. But the last 10 years is elevated to a different level. And there's a very authoritarian slant. And it bothered me, again, growing up in a military family. The motto was, either do something about it or shut the hell up. And so I decided, I've been working for townships over the 20 plus years that I was an attorney. I have advised them, litigated statutes for them, ordinances, regulations, drafted them. And so I feel like I have the experience to do it, so that's what motivated me to run. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our second question. And Tom, I'm going to have you start this time on the economy. What are the biggest economic concerns facing families in Bucks County right now? And what would you do if elected to make life more affordable for them?
One of the key issues is inflation. And inflation happens only because the demand for a product exceeds the supply. That is the definition of inflation. And the only other thing that impacts inflation is when we have monopoly practices. As a congressman, I believe it's possible for Congress to use all the levers of government to identify imbalances between demand and supply and then address them as effectively as possible. The government has a huge ability through incentives to drive change, to improve supply, to address that imbalance. And as a congressman, I think the Republicans have decided not to actually govern. They haven't governed at all for the time they've been in control of Congress. And I believe when we move to Congress, we look at the economy and we try to address affordability. One of my key concerns is housing. And it's interesting, in California today, 1 out of every 5 residential permits is for an auxiliary dwelling unit. And I just finished building a house in Bucks County. I've got 100 feet in the back of my lot. You could put in a dwelling unit, small apartment, family starting out, low rent, enable them to actually begin to get a hold of their finances. So I would strongly encourage Bucks County and across America to begin to identify ways we can address housing costs efficiently and effectively.
Thank you. Rob, same question.
So for economic issues facing people in the district, I mean, yes, inflation is making everything cost more. Grocery prices, my wife brings home the grocery bill and says, look at this, and I say, oh my God, my head explodes. Affordable health care is a huge issue because the subsidies have been cut, and people don't realize this. When you cut the subsidies for ACA, for the so-called Obamacare, those people either have to decide, I'm going to pay these outlandish premiums now, or I can't afford it, and I'm just going to go without health care. And they often end up going to a hospital because some condition they had which could have been easily prevented and taken care of at the initial stages, they end up going to a hospital to get taken care of there, and it costs so much more to deal with it then than it could have been earlier. We spend as a nation an outlandish amount of money per capita for people's health care, like almost double the next country. We need universal health care. Universal health care, single-payer system is ideal, where the government just runs it, but if not that, a public option that is so affordable, so comprehensive, and such quality care that people will flock to that and force private insurance companies to adjust how they act in this country or go out of business, basically. Housing and child care, housing has become unattainable for young people wanting to start a family and buy their first home. And child care has become so expensive that people are having fewer children. We have a declining birth rate in this country. Part of the reason is because people can't afford to have children. So there are so many ways we are just shooting ourselves in the foot. And it's been happening for 50, 60 years since our government has been sort of taken over by billionaires and corporations who donate scads of money to congressmen and presidents to ensure that they get the legislation that they want and that does not work for rank and file working people.
Thank you. Mike, same question.
Thank you. I think the secret to fixing the economy is redistributing wealth from the very top tier outward to the folks who need it. I think, as Rob pointed out, the last 50, 60 years, our economic policy has been taken over by the billionaires. Our government has enabled those folks to concentrate wealth at the top, and as a result of that, you're seeing both policies that are not reflective of the reality on the ground for people who are trying to buy housing, afford healthcare, afford their groceries. I think you're seeing a rising housing cost because the folks who are buying houses are not actually folks, they're corporations, and they're driving the housing costs up for everybody. And I think the third part of that is about enabling people to make a decision about what job they want. For instance, I grew up being told I had to go to college and have a white-collar job in order to be successful. When I was 40, it turned out I decided I didn't need to do that, right? I like to work with my hands. I went back to school and started taking trade classes. That sort of flexibility for people to jump careers midway into something like a trade, which is a thing we desperately need, is a role government can play. That training should be affordable and accessible for anybody who wants to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. And Tracy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, as a congressman, I view my role as lawmaker, right? We control statutes and regulations as well as the purse strings. So if you're talking about something that would impact the district, I think for me, it's there's a couple, there's a lot, but the top two I would probably go with is sort of reforming the federal financial assistance that trickles down to the state and local levels. So, for example, I am a board member of the United Way of Bucks County. They have a help center here in Bristol, and one of the stories that I was told about when I first came onto the board was there's a woman that comes in. She works at a giant supermarket. She works at deli counter at this giant supermarket, and she does qualify for federal assistance. And she comes into the help center, and they help her to make sure that stays balanced and that she gets the things that she needs. Well, she came in and she had gotten a promotion, and they gave her a $1 an hour promotion, which was fantastic. However, when they started putting it into the system, she actually was going to end up netting less money to take home because that extra $1 an hour kicked her out of certain programs that she would have been entitled to. So had she gotten a double promotion, which isn't realistic, and gotten a $2 an hour raise, she would have been fine, and she would have been working her way out of the system. But that's not practical. She didn't get a double, no employer is going to give you the double promotion. So she had to go back and turn down the promotion so that she got the most benefit that she could for her and her family. That's a broken system. I don't care how you look at it, that is a broken system. And part of it is because it gets too universally applied. People in Bucks County, another thing that I learned is 25% of the Bucks County residents qualify as what they say essentially working poor. They call it ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, employed.
So these are people who have jobs. Sometimes some of the people that come in, that's a single mom working 2 jobs. So she's not lazy. She's not, this isn't fraud and abuse. She's taking advantage. She's being taken advantage of an expensive environment. So that would be probably my primary one. And that would also tie into minimum wage, by the way. I would increase the federal minimum wage because that seems to be the only way that Pennsylvania is willing to consider raising its own minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, we're going to start with you on the next question. We're going to dig in. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Lucia, go.
No
I
problem.
lost my way. Go ahead.
No worries. It's hard to go last because so many good answers. Great responses. I totally agree. I would also offer that affordability is about basic needs. It's about quality of life, and it's a complex and interconnected issue. Affordability is about our relationships with other countries. We see the effect that tariffs are having. Arrogance is expensive, and humility and collaboration are what's needed. Our global supply chains are something that we rely on and we are a part of. The second thing is really appreciating our workforce. I think investing in education and also technical and trade schools in particular, and fundamentally acknowledging the role that the immigrant community contributes to our economics is important. We are facing shortages in the building trades. We're facing shortages in agriculture. That drives prices up. Climate change. Climate change is making a lot of things expensive, from eggs to oranges. For example, oranges, 40% decrease in production from 2020 to 2024 because of the increased frequency of extreme weather, disease because of warming. Orange juice costs twice as much now. The last thing I would say is bad policy. We subsidize the most expensive and dirtiest and volatile forms of energy instead of leveling the playing field for clean, affordable energy and the infrastructure to get it to us. And then before we do that, we have started building data centers. Utility prices are skyrocketing. I know my bills don't look the same as they looked 2 years ago, and people are really feeling that when they're trying to keep their homes warm in the winter. Good policy can fix these things.
Thank you very much. Now we'll dig into healthcare, starting with Rob. As we know, funds for the Affordable Care Act were gutted. And because of that, approximately 500,000 people in Pennsylvania now face the steep health insurance premium increases. What do you see as the federal government's role in ensuring affordable health care?
Well, I guess I jumped the gun on that with the last question. But since I did jump the gun there, I'll also add to my last question that one thing I will do to make things more affordable for people in this district and the country is to have change their tax code so there is no tax on the first $20,000 of income, $40,000 for married couples. That should save people $2,000 to $4,000 a year. And frankly, I want to do more. We're going to shift the burden upwards on the tax code to health care. As I said, I'm all in for universal health care. It's way past time for this. 30, 35 other industrialized, advanced economy nations on earth do this. Even some that aren't so advanced do this. Are we incapable here in the United States? I thought we were the country that had big ideas and can get this done. The reason why we're not doing it, money in our elections. The private insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, they do not want to shift. They do not want this wealthy country to shift away from private insurance. So they fight it at every turn. As I said before, I want universal health care, the single-payer system where the government runs it. It's pretty much Medicare for all. So if you switch jobs, you have your same health insurance. If you become ill, you don't get kicked off, and you get quality health insurance. I mean, I have private insurance right now, and I have diabetes. So I have a glucose tracker on my arm. I used to have a good glucose tracker on my arm, but my private insurance company said, you can't have that one anymore. Here's this crappy one. You use that. And it's always failing on me, and I'm always having to call them up and say, this failed. People who say, oh, you get better insurance through private insurance, I do not agree with that at all. This is something the government can do, and I think can do it well. At the end of the day, we can decide what kind of country we want to be. We are a capitalist-based economy here, but we don't have to be a Darwinian-based capital economy. We can have benefits to being an American citizen where you have health insurance and as a basic right, not a commodity that you have to purchase from private insurance companies who are trying to make a profit off of your health care. The government should run it as a nonprofit to ensure that citizens get what they need. Again, if we can get money out of our elections, I think we can finally get there. And if you vote for me, and if I get sworn in January 2027, that's going to be one of my absolute highest priorities, second to maybe impeaching Donald Trump.
Okay, thank you. Mike, same question on healthcare.
Thank you. Healthcare is a major, the most, Corey Robbins, I agree with the most major issue aside from shoring up the foundation of our democracy. I don't think we can get very far without that. I spent 20 years in the federal government, nearly 20 years, 9 active duty military. I served in Iraq at the explosive ordnance disposal during the surge, clearing the Route Tampa from Baghdad up to Camp Striker. And I only mention that because I spent that entire time on TRICARE, which is government-run, single-payer healthcare. I paid nothing, and it was amazing. Everybody in America should have the same health care that our military has. We do it already for millions of people. We do it well, expand it out, and make it easy. So I've seen that. And from my time in State Department, again, 9 years in State Department, representing the United States abroad, protecting American citizens abroad and American interests abroad, I saw lots of healthcare systems in other countries, and one of two things is usually true. They are either the government paying for care, and the care is fairly decent, and if you want, you can add additional care on at your own cost, or it's reasonably priced, and you can pay for it out of pocket. I unfortunately have been the recipient of some medical care in foreign countries, and when the bill came at the end, I was able to pay it without having to take out money from my retirement. So that's my last bit on healthcare too. We've got to fix the system. It shackles people to jobs they don't need. Healthcare has to be divorced from jobs. That's an economic issue, so that people are free to pursue the job that best suits them and not the one that happens to pay for their healthcare, which is extraordinarily expensive. Sorry, that's it. Thank you.
I appreciate your passion on that. Tracy, again, healthcare.
Sure, thank you. Look, I concur with both Rob and Mike here in terms of we can play a role in this. Government can play a role in it. I believe, again, the role of a congressperson is to, write law, enforce, regulate it when it needs to be regulated, reform it when it needs to be reformed. I believe that the ACA is not a perfect system, but I think it is a system. I believe they've allowed the health insurance companies to manipulate that and bastardize it, and that needs to be regulated. I'm an advocate of regulating the health insurance industry. I believe that is one of the major problems. They are massive lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and I think that they have made this system exponentially worse, and unfortunately, our current Congress is allowing that to happen, including our own current congressman and the role that he played in dealing with this. Notwithstanding his courageous move to sign a discharge petition and then actually voting to support Mike Johnson's version of a bill 3 days later that actually did not extend those subsidies. So, again, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. But as far as the healthcare, I don't believe, to Rob's point, we are too wealthy of a nation to have people go without healthcare. We also, kind of to Mike's point, we shouldn't have people going into bankruptcy because they have a cancer diagnosis. That we are too powerful and wealthy of a nation to ever allow any of our people to fall below that. I think that is the role of the federal government. I believe we should be that safety net. We should not allow our people to fall down to that level. Now, how we deal with some of this application, I think that's where some of us differ. I believe that there are ways to make sure everybody gets health care. One of my concerns with a universal health care, I would love everybody to have health care, but it can be, it is very expensive in terms of how are you going to pay for it from a governmental side. Or if we're willing to raise our taxes or cut in other areas significantly, then we can do that. Speaking to TRICARE, my father is on TRICARE for life. right? He's 30 years in the Army. He has TRICARE for life. I will tell you, though, that it dovetails with the VA. So if we're going to start repairing a lot of our health issues, we need to revisit the Veterans Administration, because I've just talked with him this weekend. He cannot get a doctor's appointment, and because he's capitated to the VA, and private doctors, when they see VA, they get scared and they back away. And he needs surgery for his back, and he cannot get in there. So that's the basis for a really good platform, but it gets connected to a lot of other federal programs that would need to be addressed.
Thank you. Lucia, healthcare.
Yeah, I know this has been said, but I think it's worth repeating. Healthcare is a human right, and we have to treat it as such. There were many devastating things in the One Big Beautiful Bill. The cuts to Medicaid and the impossible bureaucracy imposed has led to consequences across the medical system, but also the education system. The goal here, I feel, is to break it so much that we think we need to privatize it. But that then puts us in the same situation that we are in with healthcare generally. It's broken because it's for profit and not for people. We have a lot of patchwork to do. Yes, we have to roll back some of these cuts. We have to make Medicaid more accessible again. We have to extend the ACA subsidies, of course. But these are just patches for a very broken system. So I agree wholeheartedly. The only way to make the system work is through something like Medicare for All. Otherwise, we leave people out. By definition, without universal health care, someone is left out. I also have lived abroad. Half of my family lives in a country with universal health care. They sort of scoff at the idea of a monthly premium or denial of coverage or going into debt for medical care. It seems so inhumane to them that that would be a reality. We're very behind on this, and it's time that we catch up.
Thank you. Tom.
I think all of us fundamentally agree. Universal health care, we have to get there. One of the aspects about being in politics, being in Congress, being in the Senate, being the president, you can't do things overnight. But what has to occur is an underlying direction we need to go. I have a number of members of my family who have benefited dramatically from the fact that finally same-sex marriage was recognized, and it wasn't recognized until it was recognized. And the same thing has to be true with universal health care. We need to push, we need to push, we need to push, and if you keep pushing and you recognize the time it takes for politics to actually unfold, the only way to get there is to start pushing now. After several years of work, I am now on Medicare, and it works incredibly well. I'm able to get to doctors, the bills come back, and they're reasonable, I can handle them. But the fact of the matter is that we can begin to introduce universal health care by talking about Medicare and gradually moving the age down by which people qualify. I have people who have been work for me in the trade skills. They worked from high school on. I will tell you, by 60, their bodies are done. They need to have easier access to Medicare at a lower age.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any time to respond to anything people said, or was that not in our schedule?
This is a forum, not a debate. Thanks. But we are running ahead of schedule, so I might throw in an extra question here. But next, we'll start with you, Mike. We are seeing right now some of our electeds who are not holding town halls or are not setting appointments for their constituents to come in and meet with them. If elected, how would you represent the voters who have different priorities than you?
I love this question. Thank you so much. It sort of gets first to one of the things I said in the beginning. One of the reasons I love this community so much. This is a vibrant political community where opposing viewpoints are accepted, debated, and folks are generally very reasonable. I think we also have to remember that between a quarter and a third of the country continue to support the president. That's not in the Republican agenda, and I don't think that those people are the key to reaching out to those people, I think, is to reach out to them as Americans. We share this American value. It's the thing that motivated me to run. The right of American citizens to oppose their government, and use their voice to oppose the government without intimidation, harassment, or imprisonment. And we're seeing that destroyed today. I think communicating with people about basic American freedoms, the right to bear arms, the First Amendment, the right to freedom of speech, the Fourth Amendment, the right to be private and have privacy, these things are foundational, and we can see with our own eyes that they're under threat. I think that's the discussion I'd like to have with folks who have cast a ballot or have cast a vote for Donald Trump or Republicans in the past.
Thank you, Tracy. How would you greet people with different priorities?
Well, yeah. All right. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. See, right there, there's some cooperation, right? We need more of that, right? So this is something that I've talked to some Democratic committees about over the last several months. I look at this district and, you know, it's purple, right? I think they like to talk about red, blue, and purple. There's 202,000 registered Republicans. There's 192,000 registered Democrats. There's 85,000 independents and unaffiliated. In the 2024 general election, that was 20% of the vote. So if you're not able to talk outside of your own party, you know, you're not going to prevail in this district. And I think when we've had these politicians who won't join into a group town hall setting, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, I think that hurts the public, right? That hurts we the people. And that's, you know, back to my platform of why I got into this. We have gotten so divisive in this country. It has become so us versus them. And I think one way to break down that us versus them approach is to have these types of town halls and let people hear from, I mean, we don't all agree on the same things, but we all agree that we want to see our country improve. We want a pro-democracy, pro-checks and balances return to what is some semblance of normalcy. And so, you know, I believe anytime you've got a chance to reach out to that other group, whether it's the 85,000 independents or the 202,000 Republicans, and you can find that common ground with them, I think there is more common ground than people believe. And when you keep everybody in their silo, it's to the advantage of some of these career establishment politicians, because in my opinion, they're the one fomenting this thing. They're creating this divisiveness. It's the us versus them. And I don't like seeing it from the Democratic side or the Republican side. And I think until we can start actually all getting together and having that conversation and seeing that we have some different opinions, but you're not my enemy, I'm not your enemy, we the people are getting the raw end of the stick here. And that's where I hope the voters will come out and support somebody who's not an establishment, you know, pre-prescribed politician. Thank you.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. Thank you. I think it starts with listening and talking with each other. Listening and talking are free. TV ads don't listen. So I think it is in the way, as I mentioned in the preface, how we campaign is how we will lead. So I think it is important that talking to people and listening to people is something we center now. In terms of reaching people that might disagree, I think there are core values that are shared. I think a value that we are really focused on in our campaign is fairness. And I think, you know, Mike pointed out earlier, our economic system is unfair. What unifies us, even if we disagree about priorities, is that we're the 99%. And that 1% holds $50 trillion in wealth. We're on the same side of a power structure that is keeping those people rich by keeping the rest of us down. That's a unifying theme, and that opens the door to real conversation about how do we fix it and what can the future look like if we fix it. The other thing I would offer is honesty and clarity. I think what people are very tired of right now is not knowing where people stand. Representative Fitzpatrick says one thing here, and then he goes to Washington and he does something else. People might disagree with me, but they will know what I think. They will know what I will do. They will know that I would adhere to my core values. And I think people are looking for that right now.
Thank you. Tom?
So for the last 4.5 years, I've fulfilled a lifetime dream of building my own home. I believe when it's finished, it will be net zero energy use, sending electricity back into the grid. But one of the real privileges and pleasures of doing this is that I've had people come help me. I have excavators, I have plumbers installing water lines. The conversations we have had, and I'm right next to them, I'm building with them, you know, oh, your dad, your great-grandfather's president of the United States, yeah, but I'm here building this house with you. It was fascinating to me to have them realize that when my plumber's putting in the water line, I need the excavator there are about 6 people. And the plumber looks up and he says, I've been down in this ditch for 30 years. I'll be damned if someone's going to get money from the government for free. They can get down in this ditch with me. And it's a pretty compelling statement when they make it. What I found to be possible based off that statement while we're sitting there and he's connecting into a crummy water line connection is, but actually how much money goes to people and how many people do you think are really getting something for free, and how many people would you trade places with? For instance, if someone has a bad motorcycle accident in front of us right now and is bleeding to death, are we going to say, do you have health insurance? And if not, that's your fault, and I'm going to let you bleed to death. The fact is, this is a nation that needs to take care of people in need. It is a reasonable, fair thing to do. And if you begin to recognize and accept that there are people in unusual circumstances, would we let someone starve in the street in front of us? No. So in fact, all those people, when we started giving them good examples, they said, yeah, okay, yeah, that person needs it. The amount of fraud of the few people who get something from the government and don't work for it is really minimal and a tiny expense of this country. What was also interesting is when I said, well, what about all the billionaires that are ripping you off? And I realized billionaires exist in a world that is so far removed from those people building this country, doing the work, that they don't connect with them at all. Oh, I guess they made their money and somehow. So it is a huge gap for us to reach across to those people, recognize that in fact the real cause is not someone getting something a little bit free from the government, but it's the people who are ripping them off and setting up a system that makes it so hard for them to earn a living.
Thank you. Rob?
So the question was about, at least in part, about how I would represent people who have diverse opinions from myself. And my short answer is the same way I represent people who have the same opinions as myself. I'm going to follow the Constitution, the James Madison vision of the Constitution, what he meant in spirit. And I'm going to see to it that we alter course correct our government so that it works for all the people. I'm happy to listen to anybody. I've met people all across the political spectrum as I've run for office, even before that. I met with a fellow named Andy Meehan, who ran against Fitzpatrick as a Republican back in 2020. We had lunch, and if you know him or ever heard of him, was at least a hardcore Trump-loving Republican. He wants me to be Fitz, so he told me how he thinks I could do it. And we had a great lunch. We talked about the Constitution. It was civil. Nobody called anybody a libtard or anything like that. Before the election in 2024, there was a group of young guys wearing Trump shirts registering people to vote in the Home Depot parking lot. Hot as hell day, like in August. So I watched them, I went over to them and talked to them and said, how can you guys support this guy? And we talked for about 10 or 15 minutes, a very respectful conversation. I was perspiring like crazy out in like 95-degree weather. Nobody yelled, nobody called anybody a name, nobody did anything like that. And actually, I think I provoked them into thinking about some things a little bit, hopefully. But I'm happy to hear anybody's concerns as a congressman. I intend to do a town hall, at least one every quarter if I'm elected to office. That means 8 in 2 years. Unlike Fitz, who nobody even seems to ever know where he's going to turn up. He's like Find Waldo or something like that. He pops up and gets his photo taken and he hits the road. And if people want to come there, if they disagree with me, and they want to stand there and yell at me for 2 hours or however long a town hall will be, I'll sit there and listen to it. I mean, I don't understand why Fitz doesn't do that. You don't have the backbone to stand there and listen to that? Are you going to cry? Are they going to hurt your feelings? They're your constituents. If they feel like they just want to yell at you, then I'll sit there and listen to them yelling at me. You know, so what? You know, I guess the concern is someone will take a video of it and then it'll look bad for you. I don't care. I really don't care. I'm going to Washington, if I'm elected, to do things. I'm not running to be a congressman. I'm running as a citizen because I give a damn about this country and about the people in this district. And that goes for all the people, even though if I disagree with you where you stand politically. Again, I'm going to use the last 30 seconds or so to push back about the cost of universal health care. If you take away the premiums that people pay for private health care, the money they save there, and you allow the federal government to develop a low-cost, universal health care program, we will save per capita in this country. If we can bring what we pay per capita for health insurance down to the level of other countries, that'll be great. I was getting the runoff over there.
Okay. Well, we do have extra time because you have all been so concise and give great answers. We're going to add in a question here. We're going to start with you, Tracy. What is one issue that you would like to talk about that was not asked of you today? Putting you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot. One issue. Well, look, I mean, this is top of mind because right before I got in here, I was having a meeting about this. So I'm gonna choose this one, which is, I think it's the best way to describe it is the challenges between political parties, right, and within political parties. So, for example, for me, I'm looking at this within the democratic structure. So none of the questions today have led to this, but as some of you are aware, I was a registered Republican, and I've changed parties, and I'm running as a Democrat. And I've been happy to do it. I can understand why it's reasonable for some folks to have a skepticism about, what made me change my mind? What great watershed moment happened? And there was no great watershed moment, and I've shared that with the committees that have asked that question. I worked with a lot of Republican boards, and so they hired a Republican. That being said, I'm disheartened by the way this process works. Like, we are all showing up and doing these town halls, but there is an entire political system that really caters to the establishment, caters to incumbents, caters to people who, I've had people tell me, well, why do you think you can just run for Congress? You haven't been part of our committee, or you haven't done this. And what I take from that, the message I receive from that is, get in line. And, once you've been an elected official for 15 or 20 years, then, this will be your moment to finally do that. And I think that is what is fundamentally wrong with our government. What we've been talking about within my campaign is almost every American will say, we need to change what's happening in Washington, right? And I think we all agree with that. But one of the answers that we've started coming back with is, well, if you want to change what's happening in Washington, you need to change the type of person you're sending to Washington. Not the name of the person you're sending to Washington, the type of person. And our political systems have been structured in such a way, and we, the people, should take some responsibility for this, because we allowed these two parties to overwhelm our political system, and now they control it. And we have the power with our vote to change that. But too often we allow the establishment to just roll up the next person that they want to put up there, and we're like, well, this guy is a D or this person is an R, and we pick one of these two. And there's a lot of other very worthwhile, qualified candidates out there, but I believe our system is not organized to allow for that to happen. And that will include the upcoming endorsement meeting that we are required to get petitions signed in order to get on the ballot. Those petitions can start getting signed on February 17th. The Bucks County Democratic Committee is going to endorse a candidate on the 21st. 4 days after we're allowed to start getting signatures, they're going to make an endorsement meeting. And it is very politically driven. So that just happens to be on the top of my mind because I literally came out of a meeting. But thank you for the question.
Thank you. I do want to say that the Bucks County Dems, it's in their bylaws. of when they have to do the endorsement. So that's something you would want to talk to them about, of how to go about changing that. Lucia, same question. What have we not talked about today that you want to address?
Many things. I think one thing is colonialism rooted in racism. I think we're seeing this inside of our borders and outside of our borders. And if we want to rebuild the integrity of this nation, we have to say things as they are. One of those things is abolish ICE. It is too rotten to reform. It is dangerous for us, and we need those resources for a safe and just immigration process. The other thing is that Israel committed a genocide in Palestine, and we have been complicit. And it is high time that leadership says it, because we will not change our actions unless we confront the truth.
Thank you. Tom?
I'm very concerned about the notion of leverage in this country. How do we actually make things happen? And what we haven't talked about is the fact that in 71 days, the United States government went another $1 trillion in debt. So what's happened in this country is that the Republicans used to be wildly concerned about the debt ceiling. And they used to accuse Democrats of being tax and spend liberals. The fact is, what's happened with the Republican Party is they've said, look, we're not going to tax wealthy people who have plenty of wealth, as Lucia pointed out, $50 trillion worth of wealth. We're not going to tax any of them, but we're just going to keep spending. $1 trillion was $5 million an hour that we were going into debt. The fact of the matter is we've got to restructure a tax system in this country that is more equitable, that figures out some way to tax wealth. It is a very complicated issue to try to undertake, but it's another one of those where you start at the beginning and you just keep saying, look, this is where we have to get to. We've got to figure out a way to tax wealth. And until we do, we're going to continue to essentially run ourselves into bankruptcy, even though we can keep printing money, but printing money helps stoke inflation. That's just the fact. That's the way things work. And the second thing I would say, I totally agree with Lucia. ICE has to be abolished. It's not fixable. They're supposedly getting rid of dangerous criminals, and they've shot and murdered 2 Americans. They're the ones creating violence, not the ones that are supposedly addressing the violence of issue in this country.
Thank you. Rob?
So I'll agree with Tom and Letitia. You cannot reform ICE. To say you can reform ICE is like saying you can reform the Gestapo. It is irredeemable now, and it's Trump's fault. I agree with Tom about the national debt, and I have on my website an issues page where I describe a revamping of our tax code, taxing the wealthy people, which we used to do a much better job at doing, but over the past 40, 50 years, we've got away from that. There's a big plan on there, which hopefully I've explained in a way that's readily and easily understood. And if you go there, you'll find that out on the issues page. But the main thing I'm all about, the one thing I want people to remember about me is I want to get money out of our federal elections completely and totally. I do not want any private money to be made to any candidate for federal office, Congress, Senate, President. I want our people who run for federal office to have to apply for a federal grant by creating a web page on the FEC where you have a photo, video, statements and surveys and whatever, where people can go there, read about you, and discover who you are and what you're all about, maybe follow up with some questions, and then they decide, okay, I like candidate B. That person is worthy of a tax grant to run for government. We do that. Everybody who qualifies gets the same amount of money. Nobody has a financial advantage. If you run out of your money before Election Day, too bad. You have to learn to live in a budget before you get to Congress. How about that? And this will ensure that people will have to run on their personal integrity, the strength of their character, their moral clarity, and their ideas, not on the size of their campaign's bank account. People, when I mention this, they say, oh, how are you ever going to do that? It's always been how it's been. There's so much money involved. How are we going to get that done? Well, the amount of people who are influencing our elections with such fantastic wealth and buying congressmen is such a tiny group. And everybody else is, we're talking about 240 million eligible voters who could say, you know, this is our country, these are our elections, this is our government, we're taking that back. And I'm asking you for your support to help me get there and to get this done, to get money out of our elections. It's poisoning our government, and it's making sure government does not work for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. The thing that really riles me up, and there are many, but I think you're getting to see what each of the candidates right now has, what their particular bailiwick is, right? And mine is personal liberty, law and order, putting the order back in law and order, and having a predictable government that adheres to the Constitution and treats everybody with equal justice. And so, for me, what scares the heck out of me in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is $75 billion additional dollars for ICE. $75 billion with a B, right? So that's an immense amount of money. That's $45 billion for new detention facilities across the country, and your Congress voted for it, including Fitz, because that will bring jobs into each one of those communities. It will purchase a piece of land. It will put logistics and people inside of those facilities, and once that happens in all of our communities around America, it will be very difficult to turn that system off. That is jobs. That's Fitz's big job, his big jobs bill for this district is putting a detention center here. And $30 billion for new ICE. Inside of that is spyware. Inside of that is an infrastructure for the government to use technology, which it has not used in the past, commercial technology, to invasively track American citizens, particularly those who oppose it. So with this $75 billion bill, you get a countrywide network of detainment facilities and $30 billion worth of new ICE agents and technology that will enable them to peer into your private life and track you. That should scare the heck out of all of us, right? And so Fitz created that by voting it from 217 to 218 and sending that bill up to the Senate. He's not going to save you from it. And when that system runs out of immigrants to put into its detainment centers, who is it going to come for next? I'll end there and let you fill in the blanks, but that system is not going to shut down when the immigrants are done. It will continue.
Thank you. Now we have some questions coming in from people watching the live stream. Judith would like to talk about the youth vote and wants to know who here is under 55, and is this a time for energy and inspiration from the younger voters? Lucia, we'll start back with you.
Thank you for that question. I am under 55. Yes, I am in my 30s, a young Democrat. The youth vote is so important. We need that vote to win, but we need that vote too because I think that vote is a moral compass for us. And the thing about the youth vote, I don't think it's a monolith, but I think that, you know, the youth vote is something that is not about loyalty to party. It's not about following establishment, following leadership, following convention. They're galvanized by issues, galvanized by values, principles that they want to see in our government and they want to see in their future. And that's why I think it is really a time for this party, if this party wants that vote and values that vote, to be bold, to be honest. One of the ways that we build energy too is by bringing choice. I think the youth, just like anyone, wants to have choice, and that is why I am inspired that we have so many primary candidates, because a healthy primary gives people choice, gives people options. We get to hear different ideologies and perspectives and bring people's different backgrounds into it. So I hope we can energize people this year and rebuild trust, not in this party in general, but also in politics. That is how we have a healthy democracy.
Thank you. Tom, are you under 55, and how do you feel about the youth vote getting them energized?
I'm just a touch over 55. I've been working in education for 36 years of my life. I think one of the things that I do really well is connect with young men and women. I have one of the great pleasures of being a teacher is that you have people report back to you what they're doing in their lives. It's huge. I believe I have the ability, because I've been doing it for 36 years as a track coach, as a teacher, as an educator, to connect immediately with young people. I was teaching a summer class in English for kids from the inner city, and one day I look around the corner and there's a woman that stuck her head in the door, and she disappeared. Then she stuck her head back in. I said, "Hi, can I help you?" She said, "Well, my daughter Tiffany, it's summer school and she can't wait to get here. And I needed to see what you look like." It was probably the sweetest compliment I ever got as a teacher. But we had a class, and you can get young people engaged if you connect, if you listen, if you feel them, and if you understand where they're coming from and what the world looks like to them. So I feel really confident in being able to connect with young people in the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I'm 42. No, all right. I'm 63, and I own it. But when I speak to people, I don't care what your age is, I speak to everybody the same way. When I was at a recent meeting, a committee Democrat meeting, where I made my impassioned speech, and I railed against this and that, and I'm throwing my arms up in the air and all this, and then I had my time done because I had to get to another meeting. As I walked out of the meeting, a young woman followed me out the door, a young, 25 years old, probably less than that. She wanted to follow up with me, and I told her, I got to get going. Yeah, but can I ask you about this? And I said, okay, here, go ahead. And we kept talking, and I asked her to walk with me to my car, and she hit me with a few more questions. I gave her one of my cards, and I said, follow up with me. You have any more questions? That's great. I talked before about how I was talking to those young guys in the parking lot. Our social media, I'll say director, is a University of Penn student. A young woman named Charlotte who kicks butt for us. She's on our team, and what are you waving at me for? It's my campaign manager calling attention. All right, you're young too. But there are a lot of young people who reach out to me. As a matter of fact, somebody sent me an email the other day. Please don't take this as an insult, but it's a pleasure to see an older guy talking about his concern about Gaza and so forth and so on. And I said, don't insult me. I own it. I'm who I am. So the point is, and I'll also mention, I've been to Young Democrats meetings, and how many of them are unhappy. Some of them tell me, another funny story. I was talking to, at one meeting, they told me, they feel like the old Democrats get in the way. And one of them was talking to me. She's shorter than me. She says, yeah, the old Democrats get in the way. She looked up and saw my silver hair, like she was all chagrined that she brought that up. But young Democrats or young people should not wait, to be asked to the party, whether it's the Democratic Party or whatever. There are young people running all around this nation. There's a young woman named Kat Abigazela, say that 3 times, running out in Illinois, who does a fantastic job. I actually try and learn from her, watching her moves, because she's a master of social media. And I would, if I'm elected to Congress, I will treat younger people the same way as I treat anybody. You tell me what your concerns are. I will listen. I used to be a software product manager. It was my job to make my clients happy with the product, so to speak. And I don't care what your age is, I'm going to listen to you. And if I can do something that improves your situation or addresses your ideas for how to make this country better, I'm going to listen. And last thing I'll say, again, I'm 63. If I'm elected no more than 3 terms, I'm not going to be in Congress when I'm 70. So I'm hoping to recruit somebody younger than me to take my place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. The youth are going to lead us out of this. The country is ready to move away from the generation that has been at the helm for a while, and the youth are the ones who will have to right the ship. And I talk about a new compact. I think the young folks are the ones. First, let's acknowledge what life has been like for these folks. Pandemic, the prospect of buying a house, definitely not a given. The idea that they will have a steady job throughout their career with a predictable retirement, also not a given. And they've dealt with tremendous economic woe. So they're a learned and experienced group of people, and I think they are ready for change. This administration, and both Democrats and Republicans over the last several years, have broken the compact, the trust between government and its people. We need to rebuild it. I don't think that we're gonna go back to the way things were. I think that the generation that's gonna live with this ought to put together the foundation for what the new compact between government and its people looks like. How do Americans expect to be treated by their government, and what do they expect from their government? And how is the government allowed to interact with its people? I think we had those things. We've watched them be broken. We need to reestablish them. It's going to be the youth that does it, and I'm very excited for that. And I also need the youth to help me in my campaign. So zforcongress.com.
All right, thank you. All right, and Tracy,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yep, thank you. Sort of to follow up with Mike a little bit, I don't think the youth have any interest in going back, right? And going back is not. There's a lot of problems with as far back, you can go 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, right? There's been a lot of problems. What I will say as far as youth, one, regarding my age, and this is a true story, recently, over the weekend, my wife and I ended up at a Perkins, and I flipped to the back of the menu, and there's a 55 and over, and I was like, oh my God. We can order any of this if we want. It was the first time I've actually been confronted with that, and it was a little demoralizing. In fact, I refused to do it. I ordered off the regular menu. But anyway, I did qualify. So, but to answer your question, so I've been at Del Val for over 20 years. So I've got the 18 to 22, 23, a couple of 25-year-olds in there too. But anyway, that group. And I teach full load, and so in business law, I see a wide swath of the students that are enrolled there, and I kind of to Tom's point, you have to message with them, right? Your message has to get across, and I've had to adjust that over the 20 years. 20 years ago, that student is different than the student we have now, right? And how they receive their message and what's important to them. And I have a 26-year-old daughter and a 24-year-old daughter. And I will tell you, they are much more politically aware and engaged than I was at their age, which is incredibly impressive. And, I probably don't get very much credit for that, but I'm really impressed by the fact that this stuff matters to them. We went with them to a Black Lives Matter protest at Princeton when they were in high school, and they came to us with it. And they made their signs, and they wanted to be part of that. So I've encouraged that, and like I said, I message well with that age group simply because I engage with them regularly, including ones that don't agree. Because what I've seen over these years is that you have one, they are more aware of certain things, but they also get unreliable information in a different way because of their access to whether it's TikTok. My daughters get too much of their news from TikTok. And that is alarming to me. Probably an area that I would want to regulate if I get to Congress, right? Because I think they're acting like news stations, even though they're not. But I've had a student who, for many years, comes in and he's got a "Let's Go Brandon" sticker on his laptop, and I see it right there from the podium. And he and I have talked afterwards, and he knows where I teach Title IX, I teach labor and employment law. I teach some constitutional stuff, and so I've engaged with him, and he is open to it. I know where his politics lie, right? But we've been able to engage, and they are open to having that dialogue. They don't like to be talked at; they would prefer to be talked with, And I think that's a good way to kind of bridge that gap. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great question too. The next one, we'll start with you, Tom. They want to know, if elected, when you take office, what are the top 3 issues that you would address immediately?
The core issue for all Americans right now is affordability. Affordability is something that you can't walk in the first day in Congress and address, but you can begin to work on. And I think a lot of this, when we talk about issues that have to be addressed, it is a long-term issue. And I think for anyone, housing is critical, healthcare is critical, job security is critical, and my strongest feeling about what I would do on the first day is push extremely hard for free childcare. When you talk about leveraging money, we go $1 trillion in debt in 71 days. if you're just printing money, let's print some money so that we can have effective, clear, fair childcare. Imagine the impact on this country if every parent, one, would think about being able to afford kids again, and two, would know that when they headed to work, their child was in a safe, well-regulated childcare situation. And the amount of economic impact that would come from that is almost unimaginable. And I've listened to so many teachers over the years. What am I supposed to do with my kids? I started a child care center at the school where I worked. It made a huge difference. Even nursing mothers could simply walk across a parking lot and take care of their young child. Free child care has a huge impact, and it's something I would push from day one.
Thank you. Rob?
3 top items. One, unfortunately, because of the results of the 2024 election, we have to stop Donald Trump. We have to stop this tyrannical, authoritarian march to whatever their vision of America is, because it's not my vision. I don't want to live in their vision of America. I want America to be based on the constitutional republic and a democracy. So I don't see any reason why any elected congressman would support a government, and even with funding a government, that is, their aim is to make us like Hungary or Russia or something like that. And I wish we didn't have to even talk about that, but it is what it is, right? I mean, I'll sign off on any impeachment article that's there. I got a few ideas of my own, including the idea that a Senate impeachment trial, there is no double jeopardy applied, as far as I understand it. So therefore, you can, once again, introduce impeachment articles for Trump's role in J6. That's my understanding of it. But if not, there are other things as well. So that's one, be a bulwark against what's going on with the administration. Secondly, I do want to get money out of our elections. That's what I talk about all the time. I feel like everything else, if we can achieve getting money out of the pockets of people running for office in Congress, we will get people who have the integrity and character to achieve universal health care, to achieve a tax code that is fair to low to middle income people while shifting the burden to people who make their living and their money off of investments and so forth. You have them pay their fair share. That's, we can address the environment. Everything that Democrats have talked about for the past 40 or 50 years, if we focus on getting money out of our elections and just have government grants, I believe we will get the quality of person in Congress who can address that. Third item, I mean, I kind of mentioned some of them in my soliloquy there, but I mean, healthcare is a huge thing. I mean, even if we can't get the money out of politics, things done right off the bat, we can reintroduce those subsidies so people can, in fact, pay for their ACA payments. We can, shore up Medicaid, and we can hopefully take action that will eventually be steps towards getting us to universal health care. As Tom said, and I think I say so on my website, we can start gradually making enrollment for Medicare, bringing down the age over time, so maybe eventually becomes 55 and then 50, and then eventually everybody's covered by Medicare. We can do that. So I'm getting cut off here, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Mike.
So the first and foremost problem has to be putting guardrails on Donald Trump. We need to put guardrails on executive authority. He has exerted a level of executive authority that is far beyond what the framers of the Constitution intended. We need to reclaim the legislative priority and the pocketbook, the power of the pocketbook, to put him back in the box. I would love to say that my first answer right off the gate would be healthcare or childcare, but I frankly don't think that we can get there in a meaningful way while he's still in office, because he'll veto it, unless we have an overwhelming majority. The first 2 years, I think, are going to have to be focused on making sure that we are shoring up the foundations of the election. And one of the things that in particular, voting. there are multiple voting acts out right now that it will impede free and fair elections in this country for generations. We need to be very cautious on this. This administration will try to impede the election in November using either federal agents to prevent people from reaching the voting place, or to seize ballots in key locations. I entirely expect this, and I think if we don't do this now, if we don't elect somebody who is prepared for this, who is ready to take it on head on, then we may not have another free and fair election in this country. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true. So that's I've been a lifelong Democrat. I'm gay and I have a partner, and we are the beneficiary of freedom to marriage and many democratic principles, but we have to shore up these things first.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sure, and I'm going to echo a little bit of Mike's positions on this because, again, on my literature pieces, the very first thing I have is pro-democracy. And what I talk about in every town hall is pro-democracy, pro-checks and balances. Affordability, healthcare, all of these things are critically important. But the foundation, the underpinnings of all of that is we have to have the constitutional checks and balances that have been eroded. Right? Everybody needs to be put back in their lane, primarily the executive branch, but even the judicial, because that's gotten a little out of hand as well. But the role of Congress is lawmaker, and that is what has motivated me to get into this race, and that would be the first issue I would want to address, which is pulling back the powers that Congress has relinquished. Same thing with the purse strings. They control the money. You got to get everything back into the control of the Congress that the Constitution allocated to them. If you don't do that, you're not going to be able to achieve some of these other issues you want to address. With that in mind, and as part of the affordability idea, I think I would go back to the idea of federal financial assistance and revamping that system, because it is not an evenly applied system. What somebody in Bucks County gets should not be exactly what somebody in rural Iowa gets, because their cost of living is wildly different than the person here. So that's one of the things that once Congress has the checks and balances and they've regained their powers, that is something that I would want to advance in a proposed bill. That, as well as addressing the healthcare issues, even nothing else to bolster back the ACA and at least return the millions of people who've gotten kicked off of health insurance the ability to get back to it, or at least not have it just decimate their budgets because they're having to pay these exorbitant 3 and 4 times premiums that they used to be able to afford. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Rob, we're going to start with you for the next question. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Keep doing this to you, Lucia. I'm sorry.
She's sitting right there.
No, that's fine. It's hard to keep track of the order.
Keep
no,
going to
no
end.
worries.
Go ahead.
I will echo some things. I think, sadly, there's a lot of damage control to be done, so we can't move forward. We have to fix. Congress is the first branch of government. It has the power of oversight. It needs to exercise that. That is something that I think will be prominent in the next 2 years, and we really need to regain control of the House to do that in a real way. The second thing is, I think that this election will show a mandate for tax reform, because the root cause of so many problems that we're talking about is just an unfair system. We want fairness. That $50 trillion of the 1% is not taxed fairly. A lot of it's not taxed at all. That has to be fixed, because our budget's only it's $5 trillion almost. Our deficit's $7 trillion. Our budget's $7 trillion. We bring in $5 trillion of taxes. Deficit $2 trillion. $2 trillion. $50 trillion we have untaxed, basically. So we can have all of these things that we talk about if we just have a fairer system. And then the third thing is, I do want to keep the drumbeat for longer term things, because that is how they get done. The legislative process is slow. We see that things don't happen overnight. I want to talk about healthcare. I want to talk about climate. These things have to be talked about to be achieved, as Tom pointed out earlier.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Rob. The question is, what are your thoughts on the Patriot Act, and would you support repealing it?
Patriot Act, you're talking about when that was enacted under George W. Bush. It's like 25 years old. I mean, it was at a time when we were attacked by terrorists. And frequently what happens in this country when some kind of dramatic event happens like that, we tend to overreact. We tend to want to, not if you recall, but during World War II, we were attacked on Pearl Harbor. Next thing you know, they're taking American citizens of Asian descent and locking them up in not concentration camps, but camps. These are American citizens, many born here, just because they were descended by somebody from Japan. The Constitution says you do not take away people's civil rights just because you're attacked. You do not. And as far as the Patriot Act goes, I mean, whether what ICE and Trump is doing nowadays is sort of fruit born of that tree or not, you can see where we are now. We can see where due process is being ignored, where free speech means you get shot and killed, by exercising your free speech right. And I will go even a step further. I have called for this a number of times. I'm asking Governor Shapiro, if you listen to this, please reactivate the Pennsylvania State Guard. Just have a press conference and maybe reach out to other governors and have a press conference and say, we are reactivating our Pennsylvania State Guard because as a precaution against what we see as happening in our upcoming elections. Steve Bannon has already come out and say, we're going to surround polling places with ICE. Who's going to stop that? Are our local police going to stop that? Are we going to have lawyers go there and say, get out of here because I have this writ and you can't be here? We unfortunately need to start thinking about that. We have that right under the Second Amendment, and when you say that to Democrats, they think about, okay, that gives people guns. That is not why the Second Amendment was created. That was created because the founders, as they were ratifying the Constitution, they were afraid they were creating a tyrant president to replace the tyrant king they just freed themselves of. Do we not have a tyrant president right now? Isn't Donald Trump exactly why the Second Amendment was created? I'm hoping that if Governor Shapiro takes the lead, and we need leaders now. We can't wait for November. We need leaders, whether you're elected to office now, to say these kind of things. And if the governor and other governors can say, we're going to reactivate our state guards as a precaution, as a deterrence, to try and get cooler heads in Washington to realize what they're doing to this country, I believe that'll go a long way towards helping to blunt what Trump and ICE are doing in our communities.
Thank you. Mike?
So the question's about the Patriot Act, which, if I remember correctly, was a reaction to 9/11 passed by Republicans that achieved a number of sort of national security agenda items in early 2000, including creating Department of Homeland Security and the Director of National Intelligence, an office occupied by Tulsi Gabbard today, and of course, Kristi Noem. I think DHS eventually became, as we've seen, a sort of internal security force for the United States, even though it wasn't intended that way, and it does not have the congressional safeguards for it to operate that way, which is how we're seeing what we're seeing now. I think the Patriot Act as a whole, for a moment, speaking to the young folks again, I am just old enough to remember it used to be able to walk into Congress and just go through a metal detector. You could go in any time and talk to your representatives. We lost a lot of freedoms post 9/11 owing to things like the Patriot Act. We increased the standoff between government and our citizens, and I think that came at our detriment. And we injected a military mindset into our civilian country and our civilian culture by doing things like turning on money for our police to become more like military and less like protect and serve law enforcement. Patriot Act did all these things. The question is it time to revisit that 25 years later? Absolutely. And reforming DHS is a key part of that. D&I, whether that needs to exist, another question. But first and foremost, returning the trust between government and its people so that there's not this concrete wall, bollard standoff between the folks who administer the federal government and run it and the folks who vote for them and pay for it.
Thank you. Tracy?
Sure. So, I think that with regards to the Patriot Act, and this is a little bit where Mike was coming from as well, again, I'm going to keep banging this drum, but as a lawmaker, that is what Congress's role is. And it was a reactionary move. It was something that our government, and frankly, I think a lot of people in the country felt at the moment, because after 9/11, that it was needed. And there are some aspects of it. That includes the reporting of if it's $10,000 or more that's deposited into a bank, you have to give the information behind it, because a lot of dark money was moved around to facilitate some of this terrorist acts. I don't know that that's necessarily a terrible thing, because it's only gotten easier to do that kind of stuff over these last 25 years, not harder. Should it be reformed or revised? 100%. It should always be looked at. In fact, one of my issues with Congress is that they don't spend enough time just because it's on the books. It could be 30 years old or 15 years old or 5 years old. You might want to revisit this. Times change, the circumstances change. That's one of Congress's, in my opinion, major roles in this, is you're in charge of the laws. Keep up with them, revise them, make them appropriate for the circumstances. And I think if you do that, to Mike's point, you'll bring down some of those walls between the public and government, right? I believe in sensible solutions, things that we the people can look at and say, hey, you know what, that does make sense. I'm glad my Congress is doing this, because it worked for a reason back in 2001, but not all of that's relevant anymore. So we can pull back on some of this. And I believe that is what Congress should be focusing a great amount of their time on, is making sure that the laws that are already on the books, A, still apply and still need to be enforced the way they are, and two, given this current administration, closing up a number of these loopholes that the Trump administration are just ramming, ICE vehicles through, and exploiting and misinterpreting, and Congress has the ability to close all of that down. One last thing I do want to say, and I just want to push back a little bit on, I'm a little reluctant. Look, I grew up, I was born in Fort Bragg and lived my whole life there. I hope that we do not, and there's a lot of people that can impact this, but I do not think we as a country want to see state guards or anything of that nature confronting federal military. Our military, those are not two relationships you want to come clashing together. And honestly, watching what I've been able to watch over my first 23 years of life, we do not want state guards being confronted by our military. It is not, they're not trained the same way, they're not trained to do the same thing. I pray that we would never be at that position.
Okay, thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I think some themes that we're hearing are stagnant and reactionary. And these are things that really have defined our policymaking process and need to change. We need more anticipatory policy, and we need more evolution that's made possible by leaders who are informed about issues broadly. That means worldviews too, and that are willing to revisit, rethink, and really work on behalf of the people. What we saw with the Patriot Act was, as people said, reactionary. And when you have to do something like that in the moment to deal with something of such gravity, you tend to overstep. That bill, as Mike articulated very well, was basically about concentration of power. One thing I think that I would add is also the infringement on privacy of citizens. That was a result of this bill. This we didn't maybe feel as much when we trusted our government, when we did not see the level of corruption that there is. But good policy prevents that from happening. And so, yes, we do need to revisit the Patriot Act and remove things that aren't working, remove things that are dangerous, like ICE.
Thank you. And Tom, finally you.
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about the Patriot Act and about, in general, how policies, and I would agree with everybody, there is a tendency to overreact, and there's a tendency for us, once we've overreacted, to lock that into long-term law. And I believe one of the best things that Obama did with the person, Cass Sunstein, who came to work for him, was to try to sit down and look at every single federal regulation and get rid of ones that didn't work and present them to Congress if they needed Congress to act them. So I couldn't agree more that the tendency is to overreact in a situation and then leave it there. What was interesting for me is that during the pandemic, there were times when I would go to a restaurant and I had to take out my vaccination card to show that, in fact, I had been vaccinated. What happened gradually is that we moved back to normal interactions among ourselves. Unfortunately, with laws, they have a tendency to get locked in, and then you've got to work incredibly hard to undo them, as opposed to the way it sort of naturally happened when we're no longer having to wear masks in every situation and show our vaccination cards. I couldn't be more in agreement with everyone here that we need to look at every single federal law and say, does this actually still apply, and do we need the results of it? And results end up getting locked into a status quo that's so hard to unlock. As people have said, once you have detention centers, it's going to be very hard to get rid of them. So I would totally agree we need to focus on unwinding federal laws that shouldn't be there, and it's a huge long-term battle.
Thank you all. Mike, we're going to start with you on the next question. We're going to get into data centers. Okay? What policy reforms would you support that balance the short-term economic gain versus the long-term environmental and energy cost of data centers?
Great question. It is. I'd love to back out a second on this entire topic of AI, and just the next 2 or 3 years are going to be incredibly important in terms of regulation and in terms of government's role in government asserting its role in putting guardrails onto AI, and also how folks are impacted by it. I'm not an economist, but I fully expect that artificial intelligence and the prevalence of it will impact white-collar jobs in the next in the coming years, and the federal government needs to think strongly about what to do now for those people when that time comes, and what policies can be put in place now to mitigate that and manage that transition. Don't think we can stop a transition with AI, but the second part of that is the technical implementation piece that is data centers. As Lucia pointed out, these data centers suck up a ton of resource and don't put a lot back into the economy. I think the local governments need to handle that problem in their lane. At a federal level, I think the government needs to put the right policies in place to ensure that the transition into our next economy happens as smoothly as possible for Americans.
Thank you, Tracy.
Sure. I think that AI and all the pieces that come with it, they're coming. And I'm not one that thinks that we should fight against it. I think we need to understand that it's coming. We're going to need to embrace it. We're going to need to figure out how to manage and regulate it. So I would endorse and support the ideas, again, from a federal level. You have regulatory authority, right? You can write the statutes. I'm an advocate of regulating some of these industries, that we used to regulate, but we don't anymore, and maybe adding some more, including, cable and internet as a utility. It's not viewed as a utility, it's a utility at this point in our lives. And so I would kind of roll some of the data center up underneath that and regulate them, and including things such as, I've done a lot of land use over the years. And if Toll Brothers wants to build a neighborhood and the township has to approve it or whatever, they ultimately approve it. But then they're like, but you're going to need to put in a playground. We're going to want a sidewalk. We're going to need a light here. We'd like to make this a 4-lane highway, whatever it may be. And I think we should be looking at that either from the federal and or state level of, fine, Amazon, you want a data center here? We understand that it's going to create some jobs, but it's also going to have some impacts. And we're going to want you to pay for this, not just pay for the building, but maybe you're going to have to subsidize the electricity bills of the people that are affected, because now you're going to just drain this grid substantially with your energy pool. But there's ways, again, that we could regulate them, and then I think you can't just do that by pay us more money. I think you also have to roll that into, the EPA has been gutted significantly under Trump. And I think you need to give it back its teeth and let this fall up underneath EPA as well as Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and and make sure that you're trying to at least address or anticipate the environmental issues that are going to be coming with these. Not to eliminate them, but to try to create a more environmentally friendly situation, or at least a remediated situation, so that it doesn't damage our environment any further. So I would approach it that way.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yeah, I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in mathematics. I love technology, but it serves us well only if we regulate it and deploy it thoughtfully. That's not what's happening with AI, and that's not what's happening with data centers. When people say, yeah, well, AI can bring a lot of good, it's true, but that's not what these data centers are doing. These data centers are for big tech companies that are competing for profit and shoving AI in our faces in ways that we cannot control. People say we need AI for national security, true, but if we want to compete with China, we should also respect China and learn from China, and they have shown that if you centralize and coordinate data centers, they're very efficient. So if it's for national security, we wouldn't have all of these data centers popping up. It's really about competition between big tech. So before we build data centers, we need to be wise about how we do it. We need to put in preconditions. We need to first understand the environmental impacts. That includes water use. We need to know how much energy they're going to use, and we have to make sure that we have a resilient grid that's powered by clean energy to do that. We also need to know how they will affect consumers' utility bills. Our utility bills are in part rising because of data centers that are on our grid that extends all the way to Virginia, the state with the most data centers. Yeah, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, the very frightening thing about AI is, as Lucia has pointed out, there's 1% of Americans that have $50 trillion worth of wealth. Every single aspect that I see of AI is simply going to serve to concentrate that wealth even in a more intense way. And I completely agree with Lucia. We've gotten to a situation where, a good example of Elon Musk, you build the data center and then you ask whether you have permission to do it. You build a data center and start using more electricity, so you build your own power plants that are kicking out more methane. It's astounding to me how fast we have let the cart get ahead of the horse. And it is going to take a huge effort of Congress, a complete commitment, to try to take something that is onrushing at a fantastic speed and say, you know what, we need to stop and rethink how we do this. It's going to be one of the greatest challenges, and the problem is going to be that the effort and the focus and the lobbying to let this go as fast as it can and continue to concentrate wealth is going to be extremely difficult to undertake and to achieve. And I don't pretend to say that I can walk into Congress and solve this, but it's going to take a nationwide commitment for us to actually bring AI under control.
Thank you. Rob?
So to Tom's point and Lucia's point about these data centers being built and there's no plan for how it's going to affect communities in the grid, why is that being allowed to happen? Part of it is, I'm going to say it again, money in our elections. If you look at Trump's inauguration, it was Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, whatever his name is, of Alphabet, the Google company, all these AI tech leaders that are there, and they had lunch with him. These are the people that are funding Trump's government that got him there, and they did that not because they think Trump's a great guy. Probably, I'll bet you a lot of them hate him, but it's an investment to them. They make billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. A few tens of millions, 100 million or something to get Republicans elected is nothing to them, and it's an investment that they expect a return on, and they get it in the form of these data centers with no regulations. I, for one, think if you're going to build a data center somewhere, you start with the idea of what's the impact on the community, and the company building the data center should, in fact, have a way to either be self-sustaining, perhaps with green energy, solar panels all over the roof and windmills and everything drawing their own power. But if not, then yes, they subsidize the electricity so people in the community aren't affected. Their bills aren't raised. AI is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's a truly amazing thing. I use it. My wife uses it. She's been using it to make our dogs talk, on behalf of our campaign. Vote for Rob. Yeah. Yeah, she's pretty proud of that. But another thing about AI I am concerned about is, okay, there are far too many jobs already being replaced by AI, especially for younger people, the sort of entry-level jobs they used to get when they get out of college. A lot of these are being now done in part or wholly by AI and somebody else using it. We have to start thinking, they used to say about Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, they call him the Great Gretzky. They say, what makes you so great, Wayne? And he said, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck's going to be. And when I look at AI, and I look 10 years down the road, 20 years, maybe not even that long, and I start to think, are we going to end up with like a 10, 20, 25% unemployment rate in this country? As one tech giant did predict, by the way, recently. Who is going to be buying the products produced by these companies that use AI if people are out of work, if there isn't a way for them to make money? I've talked about possibly universal basic income as being a possible solution to that, but the point is we have to wrap our minds around AI and do it quick, and cannot allow the AI giants to dictate what happens. And real quick, my idea about Josh Shapiro reactivating the Guard is to be a deterrence, to generate a news event that will show the world that, to kind of give Trump a punch in the nose real quick, because he usually backs down when things like that happen. So there you go.
Thank you. Tracy, we're going to start with you for the next question. Congressman Fitzpatrick already has a lot of cash on hand, and he has high name recognition. If you win the primary, how will you run against that?
Well, you've heard this multiple times in today's. I think big money in politics is a big problem. He does have a lot of money, and he's going to use it for marketing and advertising, and that's part of the current political environment. So, but I do think that at the end of the day, you still have to connect with the people in your district. You still have to connect with the voters. They do have the final say in that. So I think any candidate has to get out there that's going to go against Brian. You're going to have to get out there and meet the people, talk to the people. For me, I'm embracing this fact that, I was a former registered Republican. And I do believe those 85,000 voters, those independent and unaffiliated voters, are going to be the difference maker in there. Fitzpatrick's track record speaks for itself. He's been reelected 5 times, right? So he is able, clearly, to identify with enough of those 85,000 people. So you need to be able to connect with them. I think I am able to connect with that segment of the district. I think there are disenchanted Republicans. I know there are disenchanted Republicans. And they may not be committed to a 20-year Democratic politician, but they're open to fresh ideas and new people who have not been part of the establishment. And I think that they are winnable people. As far as money goes, listen, I think it's terrible. There's nothing you can do about it probably for this election cycle, right? It's going to happen. I would support, dismantling Citizens United as part of my role in Congress, to revise and revamp the rules around that. But for this purpose, for this election, there's going to be money from the institution. Whoever wins the primary, the DCCC is going to significantly infuse money into this race. This is considered one of the top 5 congressional races in the country. So as much as I despise the institutional funding of stuff, the Democrats are going to be institutionally funding whoever wins this primary. So while they're making a lot of, which Democrat can raise the most money, I don't think you should be picking your nominee based on which one of them can raise the most money. I think if you do that, you're going to potentially have an inferior candidate.
Thank you. Lucia?
Agree with a few points there. Certainly, the campaign should be about connecting with people, and that is first and foremost. As I mentioned earlier, I think the goal is not to match the funds that Representative Fitzpatrick has, and I think, in fact, making a point not to is powerful. I think that there are ways to campaign if you try to use less that you actually give people more ownership over the movement. Utilizing people's talents and energy and spirit and ideas and folding them in there is a lot of that out there right now. 2026 is a moment where people want to be engaged. People can be engaged with a campaign, and that is a strength. That grows power, that grows excitement, and you need less money when you pull people in that way. I truly believe this campaign should be about excitement, and that is how we win no matter how much Representative Fitzpatrick has in the bank. So it's campaigning differently, but it's also offering people something different. I think we are falling a bit into territory where we're relying on people being mad at something, giving them only things that they need to fight against and not enough things to fight for. And I think that requires strong and courageous messaging and really giving people ideas about where we stand, where we want to go, and a true commitment to delivering that.
Thank you. Tom?
So as I said, I've been watching Brian very carefully since 2016. I completely agree with Lucia that you can't run a campaign without offering alternatives. And to be honest with you, I think that's going to be one of the easiest things for any Democratic winner of the primary to do. Here's a list of all the things that we can do. We can't do any of them until we get Brian Fitzpatrick out of office, until we show him the door. I've been writing opinion pieces about Brian and about the Republican Party. I've had 30 of them published since 2016. I feel like there are times when I know Brian better than Brian. One of the things that has shocked me is how little work we have done to deconstruct everything that Brian says. I had an op-ed published in the Bucks County Herald 2 weeks ago where I took his statement on Venezuela, and every single thing that Brian writes, I can write them before he does now. He wrote a statement about Venezuela. I looked at the statement. I demonstrated that every paragraph in that statement contradicted the one before it. And it's a good example of what Brian does. You could read that statement on Venezuela and find a sentence that you liked. You didn't realize that if you read the other statements carefully, they were all contradictory. And the Bucks County Herald was pleased to publish that article. I am also going to have been, and in the campaign in the fall, take every single one of Brian's press releases and every single one of his newsletters and immediately write the response that deconstructs every single thing that he says or does or thinks or walks or talks. Brian can be deconstructed and disillusioned, have the voters disillusioned with it when they say, wait a minute, the emperor has no clothes. I think we can take the symbolic clothes off of Brian Fitzpatrick and suddenly have people say, wait a minute, this guy's been pulling the wool over our eyes for 9 years. Enough.
Thank you. Rob?
So the question was, what, beating Fitzpatrick with all his money, more or less?
His money and his name recognition.
Well, first of all, I'm going to point out that you and I discussed this before we got started today. There's a fellow named, his last name is Remet, a Democrat in Texas, who just won a state Democratic seat a week ago, whenever it was, in a district where his opponent, his Republican opponent, had like 10 to 20 times the amount of money he had. He won that district by 13 points in a district that Donald Trump won by 17 points back in 2024. So, I mean, yeah, money matters, money's important, but what's more important is the quality of the candidate. Can he articulate the argument against in this case, the sitting Republican? Can he make the case as to why this guy does not deserve his seat? He should not be allowed to raise his hand and take that congressional oath of office once again, only to break it once again. And he should not be allowed to represent this district, but because he's a member of a party that has Donald Trump as its standard bearer. Anybody who's still a member of that party, I mean, I do not understand as an American citizen how you can remain in that party with this race-baiting demagogue, this liar, this crook, I'm not going to go too far down that road, but the Republican Party just does not stand for anything other than Donald Trump nowadays. And I'm going to hang not only Donald Trump around Fitz's neck, I'm going to hang the amount of money he has around his neck. Because he and the party establishment guy that we're all running against too, they're on Facebook bragging about how much money they've got. That's what they talk about. Look at all the money I raised. Aren't I great? Look at me go. They're focused on that, and I can tell you, as somebody who's running for office, I hate being focused on money. I hate calling people asking them for money. I had a call with an elderly woman a while ago to ask for a donation, and she had a little trouble understanding me. She wasn't like maybe as sharp as she used to, and I just let her go. Thank you so much. She thinks she's going to vote for me, even though she doesn't live in the district. So I let her go, but you keep notes, and I put the notes in there, and the last thing I typed in was, "This sickens me. It sickens me that we call people, that we bother people asking for money, private money in our elections." So I don't want to stray too far from how I'm going to beat Fitz, because I know I can tear him to shreds. I know how to create a message that wins. I've been in marketing for years, and I managed products in the corporate center. I have no doubt that Fitz not only should be beaten, he can be rather easily beaten, I believe, in this district, because this is the year to do it.
Thank you. Mike?
So I agree, Fitz can be beat. And I think the person that can beat Fitz is in this room. And hey, look, I say that not like I want the best candidate to win. I'm here to hopefully bring new voters into the Democratic Party and to speak to folks who are upset about the current state of the country. But I think Fitz can be beat. And I think any one of these candidates in here would be an excellent candidate. And I will commit to helping anybody in this room who makes. We got cert coming up, and then once we get past the petition certification, look, like I want to elect a Democrat, and I'm going to continue working for the person who, in support of the person who's going to win and beat Fitz. And that's because, as we've all pointed out, he's had that seat. There's been a Fitzpatrick in that seat for 14 years. And are you better off? Are you better off than you were 14 years ago? Are you more pleased with the way that your government is functioning for you? Are you happier with your health care? Do you think the quality of your schools is better? Do you trust your police force more? None of those things have, in my opinion, gotten better. And you've had 14 years of a gentleman there who's just lied to you and told you he would do one thing and has done a completely different thing. Whenever the Republican Party needs him to advance their agenda, Fitz is there with his vote, just as he did when he crossed one big beautiful bill act from 217 to 218 and sent it to the Senate, and then voted against it later so he could say he could. That bill would not exist if it weren't for him. So I don't think he's serving the people of Bucks County. I think you can have an honest conversation with most people in the 1st District, Bucks and Montgomery, and they will tell you the same thing.
Thank you. And we're down to the final minutes here. We're going to do a rapid response round. This question, I'd like a one-word answer. We're going to start with you, Lucia. When you're out speaking with voters right now, what is the #1 issue they say is impacting them?
Healthcare.
Thank you. Tom?
Agree, healthcare and affordability.
Okay. Rob?
Actually, I find it's democracy.
Mike?
People are scared of government.
Okay. And Tracy?
One word, democracy.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to go into our final question, and I won't limit you to one-word answer for this. This seat, the U.S. House District 1 for Pennsylvania, is Bucks County and also part of Montgomery County. As you look at District 1, what do you love about this district? We'll start with you, Tom.
I've lived a lot of places in the world. I live here in Bucks County because I chose to be here. I love I love living in Chalfont. I love my neighbors. We walk up and down the road. They say, "Are you building this house by yourself?" This is a great community. If you look at the different parts of Bucks County, there is, in my mind, no better place to live. I am here by choice, and I'm here with joy, and I'm here with enthusiasm. I care about this district. It's right here in my gut, and we have got to win.
Rob?
So I mentioned earlier I grew up in Levittown, Fairless Hills, and coming down here today, I also mentioned how I went over to Wawa and I drove through some of the neighborhoods, and we've done canvassing down here. I mean, I forget sometimes because, as I said, A lot of times I visit my brothers and sisters who live here. I go straight to their house, go straight home. But this is the area that I grew up. You know, I went to high school here, played football for the Pennsylvania Falcons. There's another pro Pennsylvania Falcon guy over there. I mean, I have real visceral ties to the people down here. But we also lived in Horsham for 10 years, my wife and I. Well, actually, Horsham for 5 years and then moved up to like North Wales area. But we lived in Montgomery County. And it's a different but very similar district. There's a lot of, you know, I don't want to say congestion, but there's a lot of concentration of population up there. And we enjoyed living there, but I kind of felt, you know, my wife and I, when we were in college, we used to drive up around Jameson and, you know, Tyler State Park and all that. We thought, how beautiful it is here. If we ever have a chance to buy a home here, we will. And we did. In 1999, we moved into a house in Buckingham, and we've been there ever since. Beautiful area. I love it up there. My wife just retired, and our life is wonderful. I mean, it really is. I'm semi-retired. I walk my dogs. I meet people. We have parties in the neighborhood. We play pickleball on the cul-de-sac in July, and we do our Christmas wassailing party where we go house to house and you drink a toast. And I would rather be doing that, you know. I seriously would. But I love this area so much and this country so much that I cannot not do this. I'm doing this as an American citizen. I don't want to be a congressman. I want to be elected to Congress to do things, to halt what's going on, and to get this country back on track. It's been off track for like 50 years now, as far as I'm concerned, to make it work for the people of this district, this area that I love. My brothers, my sisters and brothers who still live down here and their families, and all my friends from high school and the neighborhoods. I'm doing this because I care. I'd rather just enjoy my life, but that's why I'm running, and I hope that answers your questions. I rambled a little bit, but go ahead.
That's fine. Mike, tell us, what do you love about District 1?
I think a lot of what I love about District 1 is already on display here. Rob was talking a moment ago about making phone calls to people and asking for money. Brian Fitzpatrick is not making phone calls to constituents one by one randomly and asking for money. We are, and the folks here are committed to running this transparently from the ground for the people and making sure that we send the best Democrat forward to compete against Brian Fitz in November. And that's why I'm here, is to make sure that we sharpen this field so that the best candidates going forward. This county is beautiful. This is my chosen home. I have a dirty secret to admit. I only moved here last year. I grew up 20 miles over the river in New Jersey in South Brunswick. Folks are still there. I've been looking. I did 18 years federal service, and when I was done, I wanted to move someplace. And I came back here because it's close to my folks. They're in their 80s now, and they need my help. And this area is perfect. This reminds me of where I grew up. I live in a house that's from the early 1700s, and it reminds me every day of how far we've come as a country. All of the souls that have lived in that house, that have died in that house, that have had joy and sadness in that house, I get to caretake it for a little while. It's just like the story of America. I get to caretake this country if I'm elected, hand it off to the next generation, hopefully a little better than I found it, and move on with my life. To Rob's point, I never saw myself running for Congress. I saw what was happening in my country, and I saw what was available to me legislatively and electorally, and I decided I had to do something. I've always raised my hand for my country, for the hardest jobs, for explosive ordnance disposal, for crisis communications, crisis management for the State Department, and now I think the national security threat is inside the House, and I need to go to Washington and help that out.
Thank you. Tracy?
I'll pick up where Mike just left off, in that, you know, this isn't another step in the ladder for me in a career rise. I've had 2 careers going, and this is a hard right into something that I've never entertained. What I love about this district is, personally, from a personal standpoint, I've been here now more years here than I have anywhere else in my life, even though I was born and raised in North Carolina. My wife is from here. Both of my daughters were born in Doylestown Hospital. They are my life, and everything about what I love about Bucks County is rolled into them. And whether it's Upper Bucks, Central Bucks, or Lower Bucks, you know, it's just beautiful geographical area. You can have all the seasons, and it's just an amazingly beautiful place. Politically, I also love the fact that, to me, this is a district that has a chance to be not just showcased because the Democratic parties want to, or the Republican parties want to showcase this district, but because we have an almost 50-50 Republican and Democratic split, and we have 20% of the electorate who are independent and unaffiliated. And I think that is a wonderful thing, and I think it's an opportunity for us as candidates, but also for the people who live here, to actually kind of re-engage with the we the people part. There's enough of a weird breakdown of these percentages that the people actually are going to be able to decide this. There are an overwhelming number of congressional districts in this country. It doesn't matter who is saying the right stuff. There's no way the other party's going to win. And that's R's and D's, right? It depends on how it's been worked. This actually is a district that can be actually democratic, little d, Democrat, right? Actually be democratic and show that we the people can control the outcome, our own destiny when it comes to our congressional leaders.
Thank you. Lucia?
Yes, so my mother's family has lived in the Montgomery County portion of this district for over 50 years. My father immigrated to that area. I was born and raised in Lansdale. This district is about opportunity for me. We were a working class family. We benefited from public parks. Whites Rose Park was every day of my youth. Public schools, public transport, SEPTA to the city to take advantage of economic opportunity, public education. I left, the state. I worked, I studied elsewhere. I learned a lot of things. I even worked in Washington in Congress. I'm back. Now I live in Quakertown in Upper Bucks County. And I love my community there. And I want the opportunity that this district brought to me to be available to others as a way of giving back, as a way of saying thank you for enabling me to make my life better. My mother also owns an old house, and something that she inspires me to do is every place she lives, she makes it better. She invests in the land. She gardens. She makes sure that it is clean and healthy. And that enriches the community in so many ways, and it's often inconvenient, it's hard, it's physically hard, but she inspires me to do that in my own way, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you. And as we wrap up today, I want to again remind everyone that this is a nonpartisan candidate forum. Everyone who is running was invited, and these are the 5 candidates who chose to appear today and speak with you. I'd like to thank the organizers who arranged this as a press opportunity and then opened it also to the general public. And I hope everyone has learned something more about the 5 of you. And I'm going to end the same way I opened. Running for office in the United States is a wonderful right that we have, and it takes bravery to do it. So thank you for stepping forward for your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you for moderating.